All right, so are you ready to get wise? Because today we're diving deep into the book of Proverbs. You know, those short sayings from the Bible, those little nuggets of guidance about, well, pretty much everything.
Life, faith, how to make good choices, avoid bad ones.
Exactly. It's a treasure trove of timeless wisdom. And in this deep dive, we're going to focus on the very beginning of Proverbs, where it all starts, with a pretty strong emphasis on finding wisdom and, well, let's be honest, some pretty dire warnings about what happens if you don't.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? The text is like, hey, listen up. Wisdom is the most valuable thing you could ever possess.
No kidding. I mean, right from the get-go, Proverbs is all about wisdom, instruction, understand. Like, they're not messing around at all.
Yeah.
But it's not just about, having this vague sense of being wise. Proverbs gets specific about, well, how wisdom actually benefits you.
Right. It spells it all out, like in Proverbs 1.2 to 4, where it says that wisdom leads to prudence, to righteous actions, and to knowledge, for just about everyone, whether you're a newbie or someone who's been around the block a few times.
And here's the thing. Even if you think you're pretty wise already, Proverbs says, nope, there's always more to learn. You know, Proverbs 1.56, it talks about how even those who are already wise can always gain more wisdom. It's a journey, not a destination. You never really arrive.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes the whole concept of wisdom so intriguing. It's this constant evolution.
Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting to me. In Proverbs 1.9, wisdom is compared to these beautiful pieces of jewelry, like a garland on your head or chain around your neck. What's up with that imagery?
I think that's part of the genius of Proverbs. It's not just a bunch of rules, it's painting these vivid pictures that stick with you. And comparing wisdom to beautiful adornments, well, it suggests that wisdom is more than just an internal quality. It's something that's visible to others, something that can actually adorn you and maybe even impact how others see you.
Ah, I see what you mean. So it's not just about you feeling good about yourself, but wisdom also affects how people perceive you and interact with you, like maybe inspires trust or respect.
Exactly. Think about it. Who are you more drawn to? Someone who just, throws out random opinions, or someone whose words are measured and insightful. Wisdom becomes this attractive quality, almost like a magnet.
Okay, so we've talked about how valuable wisdom is, but then Proverbs shifts gears a bit. It starts talking about the fear of the Lord, saying in Proverbs 1.7 that it's the beginning of knowledge. That phrase has always kind of thrown me off, to be honest. What's the deal with fearing something as a path to knowledge?
That's a really good question. And it's important to understand that fear of the Lord isn't about, being terrified or cowering in fear. It's more about deep respect, reverence, recognizing that there's something greater than yourself, a higher power.
So it's about understanding our place in the grand scheme of things, admitting that we don't have all the answers.
Exactly. It's that humility, that willingness to admit, I don't know everything, that forms the basis for real knowledge, for real wisdom. Without it, our pursuit of knowledge might be driven by pride or ego, and that can be a dangerous path.
So it's like saying true knowledge actually starts with a good dose of humility. Okay, that makes sense. But then Proverbs throws us another curveball. It shifts gears again, and we get this really intense, really dark warning about evil and sin.
Yeah, right. In Proverbs 1.1019, Solomon really paints this vivid picture for his son, warning him about falling for those temptations, getting caught up with those who are up to no good.
And he uses some strong language, doesn't he? Like lying in wait, ambush, even swallowing people alive. Like they're predators.
Right. And what's their bait? The promise of quick riches and success, valuable things, houses filled with plunder, sharing the loot. It's all about taking shortcuts and instant gratification, regardless of who gets hurt.
It's interesting because in a way it plays on those natural human desires, right? We all want those things, success, wealth, and all that. But Proverbs is saying, hey, be careful. Chasing those things the wrong way, at the expense of others or even your own integrity, that's going to backfire. It's self-destructive.
Exactly. Proverbs 1.1819 even compares it to like setting a trap for yourself. You might think you're getting ahead, but you're actually digging your own grave.
So we have this really stark contrast.
Mm.
On one hand, you've got wisdom, which is this beautiful adornment, something that elevates you. And on the other hand, this really dark path of sin that leads to, well, ruin. So
Hmm.
knowing all of that, knowing those pitfalls are out there, how do we make sure we're on the right path?
Well, luckily, Proverbs gives us this powerful guide, and it comes in the form of wisdom herself. And this is where things get really exciting.
Okay, so wisdom is like this person, right? This figure who is calling out to everyone. It's in Proverbs 1.2023. And she is not messing around.
No, she's definitely not being shy about it. Wisdom's making her presence known everywhere, in the streets, the marketplaces, even the city gates, like every place where people gather.
It's like she's on this world tour making sure everyone hears her. But, and this is something I think we can all relate to sometimes, even when wisdom is staring us in the face, not everyone wants to hear it.
Yeah, and that's where you see the heartbreak, right? In Proverbs 1.22, where wisdom is lamenting, she's actually sad about those who reject her message. Those who would rather live in ignorance and even mock people who seek knowledge. Like they're choosing foolishness instead of understanding.
Why would anybody choose foolishness over wisdom? Especially when we've just been talking about how valuable it is. What's the deal with that?
That's a great question. And it's something that, people have been trying to figure out for centuries. But I think on a psychological level, it often comes down to our own biases. As humans, we tend to gravitate towards information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's not true. We see this all the time, like on social media with those echo chambers and everything.
Oh, yeah, totally. And then there's also our obsession with, instant gratification.
Right.
Wisdom often requires patience, taking that long view and waiting for the payoff.
Mm.
But we live in a culture that's so focused on the quick fix that we often miss the deeper path, the one that's actually more meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. We want the reward without the effort, right? The success without the struggle. And that's why those tempting shortcuts, those get-rich-quick schemes, all those voices that are whispering promises of easy gain, that's why those are so appealing.
Which brings us right back to those warnings about the allure of sin. It's like Proverbs is saying, hey, look, we know those temptations are strong, so here's a heads up on how to avoid falling into those traps.
Absolutely. And even though Proverbs acknowledges that, a lot of people will reject wisdom's call, it still offers hope. It talks about repentance, about changing direction, turning away from those foolish choices, and the promise that wisdom will guide those who are willing to listen.
So it's never too late, right? To change course and start seeking wisdom, even if you've been ignoring it for a while. But then, Proverbs doesn't sugarcoat things. It gets really real about the consequences of rejecting wisdom in Proverbs 1.2433. That's not pretty.
No, not at all. You see this progression, like from those ignored calls and those outstretched hands to just completely disregarding advice and straight up rejecting wisdom's rebukes. And what happens? Disaster, distress, calamity, trouble. It's all right there.
Yeah, it's almost like rejecting wisdom leads to this feeling of constant chaos, like everything is spinning out of control. While embracing wisdom, that's what brings peace and stability.
Exactly. Proverbs paints such a clear picture of those two paths. Choose wisdom and you find security. Choose foolishness. Well, you're constantly battling turmoil.
And then there's this ironic twist in Proverbs 1.2829, right? Where it says, those who rejected wisdom will be begging for it when trouble comes knocking, but it'll be too late.
It's a pretty tragic realization, isn't it? That the wisdom they rejected could have prevented the pain they're in.
It's like when you ignore good advice, maybe from a parent or a teacher, you think, I know better, and then boom, you make a dumb decision, and it's like, man, I should have listened.
Exactly. And Proverbs is reminding us that wisdom isn't just about knowing the right answer. It's about having the humility to listen to good advice, to learn from your mistakes, and course correct when you're heading down the wrong path.
Okay, so this first part of Proverbs has been pretty intense, Wisdom is valuable. It's this beautiful thing. It takes humility. And rejecting it well, that leads to some serious consequences. But how do we actually apply all this ancient wisdom to our modern lives? Because it's one thing to read these Proverbs, but it's another to actually put them into practice.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something we'll get into right after the break.
Okay, so we've spent some time unpacking this idea that, yeah, the wisdom in Proverbs is pretty powerful, but how do we make it real in our own lives? How do we take these ancient words and apply them to, like, the stuff we're dealing with every day?
It's a really good question, and I think a good starting point is to understand that wisdom isn't just about, making yourself better or getting ahead. It's about recognizing that the choices we make affect other people too. Like they ripple outward, impacting our relationships, our communities, the world around us.
Well, it's not just about us making smart choices for ourselves. It's bigger than that, right? It's about using wisdom to be better citizens, better neighbors, just better humans in general.
Exactly. Proverbs reminds us that we're all connected, part of this larger fabric, and our actions have consequences that go way beyond just our own little bubble.
And that takes us back to that whole idea of fear of the Lord, doesn't it? It's not just about, like, personal piety or being good for your own sake. It's about aligning your choices with a higher purpose, some set of values that are bigger than just you.
Yes. It's about recognizing that there's a moral compass out there, a set of principles that can help guide us toward a more just world, a world that thrives.
So it's not just about being good. It's about doing good, right?
Mhm.
Making choices that are beneficial for everyone, not just ourselves.
Right. And that's where wisdom gets really powerful. It's not just about knowing stuff or making clever decisions. It's about using that knowledge and those decisions to make a real difference in the world.
One thing that really strikes me about all of this is that we live in a culture that's obsessed with individual achievement, you
Yeah.
know, ambition. But Proverbs seems to be saying, hold on, true fulfillment actually comes from using wisdom to serve something larger than yourself.
It's a pretty radical message, and I think it's really important, especially now. With everything going on in the world, climate change, social injustice, political division, we really need wisdom to figure out how to deal with all this stuff.
So for all of you listening out there, what's the takeaway here? What's something you can walk away from this deep dive with?
Well, I think Proverbs is issuing a challenge. It's like an invitation to embrace wisdom as this guiding force in your life. Seek out knowledge, be open to learning, make choices that reflect your values, and then use your gifts and talents to make the world a better place.
It's an inspiring challenge, and it reminds us that even though these proverbs are ancient, the wisdom they contain is still relevant today. They can help us make sense of things, make good choices, and yeah, hopefully build a better future, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
So as you go about your day, think about this. How can you take the wisdom of Proverbs and use it to have a positive impact in your own life, in your community, in the world?
It's a question worth pondering, and don't forget, even the smallest acts of wisdom can have a ripple effect. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wisdom of Proverbs. And until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep striving to make a difference.